Hi, hello everyone. I'm Sonia Ajia. Today I am here to explain about socket programming. For very first, let us see what is computer networks. A computer network system that connects two or more computer devices for transmitting and sharing the information. Whereas computer's network is a set of computers sharing resources located on or provided by the network nodes. Now let us see the introduction for socket programming. Socket programming shows how to use a socket APIs to establish communication links between remote and local access. In this, there is an order of bytes of the digital data in the computer memory. Socket program is a fundamental concept in the network communication. It allows programs to communicate over a network by using sockets. Sockets provide a way for different processes to communicate with each other. A socket is a communication connection point or the endpoint that you can name and address in a network. Let us see the what are sockets. Sockets are the endpoints of the sending or the receiving data across a network. They can be thought of as doors through which data can pass. Sockets can be created and used in various programming languages. Various types of sockets. There are two main types of sockets, which is TCP and UDP. The TCP provides reliable order and error-checked communications, whereas UPD sockets provides faster but unreliable communication. Whereas in this TCP socket programming establish a connection between a client and the server, whereas communication using TCP sockets is reliable and ensure data integrity. TCP sockets provide a string of data transmission, whereas server sockets set socket bind, listen, accept, send, receive, whereas in client socket connect, send, or receive. Whereas in this UDP socket programming, connectionless and do not establish a connection. Communication using UDP sockets is faster but does not grant the guarantee data delivery, whereas in this UDP sockets provide a datagram transmission, whereas these UDP sockets are the connections and do not establish the connection. Communication using UDP sockets is faster but does not guarantee data delivery. The UDP sockets provides a datagram transmission. Whereas this sockets APIs, different programming language provides various socket APIs, whereas in common socket APIs includes Berkeley sockets, WinSock, and Java sockets. These are the most common Java sockets. These APIs provides function and methods to create and manipulate sockets, whereas the socket APIs socket creates it creates a socket of a given domain like type portal by a phone, for example buying a phone. Mine assigns a name to the socket, whereas get a telephone number. Listen specifies the number of pending connections that can be queued for a server socket, whereas the example has call waiting allowance. Accept server accepts a connection request from a client, whereas answer the phone. Connection connect client requests a connection request to a server called as call. Send to write to connection speak. Receive form read the connection, whereas listen shut down end the call before the close. This is the algorithm of socket APIs. And next we see socket addressing. Sockets are identified by an IP address and a port number, whereas the IP addresses uniquely identify a device on a network. Port number specifies a specific service running on a device, whereas in this diagram, as shown in the diagram, see the socket connection establishment. For the TCP sockets, a three-way handshake is performed to establish a connection, whereas the client sends a signed packet, the server responds with the sign ACK packet, and the client sends an ACK packet. Once the connection is established, data can be transmitted bidirectionally, whereas client one side is client on one side is the receiver server, whereas server fin is sending the messages to the whereas from the client sends the fin message to the receiver, and the fin sends the fin plus ACK to the client, whereas then client sends the ACK to the server which has receives ACK. And the socket communication workflow. A server socket listens for incoming connections on a specific port. A client socket connects to the server using the server's IP address and port number. After the connection is established, both client and server can send and receive the data, whereas server, socket, bind, listen, accept, requeue, send, requeue, close, whereas the client socket connects, send, requeue, and close, whereas the connection between the server is a server and client is establishing a connection, three-way handshake, and the establishing a connection between the client sending data through the client server sending data, server receiving data, and whereas send and requeue is have like send like whereas the send establish the connection to the requeue through the server sending data and the client receiving data, but the close sends the connection to the requeue while client sending close messages. Now let us see socket error handling. Socket programming queries proper error handling to deal with network issues. Common error include connection, timeouts, connection refused, and network failures. Error handling ensures that program gracefully handle these situations. Now let us see socket security. Socket programming can be secured using encryption and asymptotic techniques. Secure socket layer and transport layer security are commonly used in encryption protocols. Asymptotic mechanisms such as usernames and passwords can be implemented for secure communication as seen in the previous diagram. Socket performance considerations. Socket performing performance can be affected by network latency and bandwidth. Properly optimizing socket code can be improve um, performance. Techniques like multiplexing and asynchronous sockets operations can enhance the scalability. Whereas socket programming can be used for various applications such as chat programs, file transfer, and web servers, including examples like creating a simple chat application using TCP sockets or building a web server using HTTP sockets. Socket programming can also be used for IoT public applications, real-time data streaming, and multi-layer games. Whereas it is the socket limitations. Socket programming has a limitation in terms of scalability and resource utilization. Handling a large number of concurrent connections can be challenging. Careful resource management and optimization techniques are required for efficient socket programming. That is the conclusion. Socket programming is a crucial skill for network communication. Understanding sockets, their types, and their APIs is essential for developing networks. Within the right knowledge and techniques, socket programming can enable efficient and secure communication over networks. Let us see how the socket programming works. A server runs on a specific computer and has a socket that is bound to a specific port. The server listens to the socket for a client to make a connection request. The server accepts the connection. Upon acceptance, the server gets a new socket bound to a different port. It needs a new socket, different port number to continue listening to the original socket while serving with the. Thank you for watching my video. Please like.